Last month, 13 students from the state of Tennessee were chosen as winners of the National Scholastic Writing Competition. 9 of those 13 students attend Harpeth Hall.
Today, we'd like to recognize those 9 girls by telling a bit about their award-winning work. Ladies, when we call your name, please join us on stage, and we'd also like the audience to hold applause until all of the girls are on stage.
A prolific writer and a skilled editor, sophomore Quinlan Sear composed her silver medal-winning poetic tale of betrayal, Because It Was Me, when she was enrolled in Harpeth Hall's creative writing class last fall.
Josie Beavers, 7th grade, won a silver medal in the short story category. Josie's short story, Weeping Sky, began as a response to a writing prompt in her 7th grade English class, where Josie used the word unexpected as part of an impactful story about hope.
For the second year in a row, Hav Whiting has received a National Scholastic Writing Award for her poetry. This year, she was awarded a silver medal for a poetry collection entitled, And What Would You Say If You Could? Her poems explore issues of gender, race, and globalization, and this collection has been read and displayed at the Library of Congress.
Janet Briggs, sophomore, wrote her award-winning critical essay in response to an assignment in English 2 earlier this year. Her essay examines how various characters in the novel Purple Hibiscus represent cultural and religious change in post-colonial Nigeria. Janet won a national silver medal for this essay.
Senior Katherine Jenkins composed her silver medal-winning poem, She Is, in response to an assignment for AP English Literature last fall. The inspiration for the poem came to Katherine as she was driving home one evening, windows down, mismatched shoes on, images that memorably made their way into her joyfully complex self-portrait poem.
Caroline Sehorn, 8th grade, won a silver medal in the critical essay category. Caroline's essay explores Harper Lee's use of the lessons Atticus Finch teaches his children and neighbors about the nature of integrity in To Kill a Mockingbird. Caroline's words from the concluding paragraph speak best about how the truth of this novel still resonates today. Caroline writes, as racial and socioeconomic divides seem more prevalent than ever, Lee's wisdom shows the world the importance of tolerance and kindness and speaks as a virtual parable for each generation that discovers her work.
Senior Jane Flaught wrote Tomorrowland in response to an AP English Literature assignment. In poetically considering the unknowability of the future, Jane eloquently writes, the great secret is not to expect certainty. No, that's a train fated to slip off its tracks, while a station away, I forever wait its arrival.
Cole, you want to do Cole? Yeah.
Senior Cole Hastings' U.S. history term paper entitled The Flapper Rebellion, One Large Leap for Womankind, was recognized with a silver medal. In her essay, Cole examines how tectonic shifts in social, economic, and political trends of the 1920s allowed flappers to advance the cause of women's rights.
Olivia Finlayson, 7th grade, for poetry. In addition to being a part of the 9 Tennessee Scholastic Award winners coming from Harpeth Hall, Olivia also has the distinction of being one of only 2 writers from the entire state who won a gold medal for their work this year. In her Where I'm From poem, Olivia joined sensory details such as squeaky trampoline springs who gossip as I fly, and a choir of wind chimes who sing every time there is a breeze, with being from Asian roots and a mother's loving face, soaring home like a bald eagle to America with a new addition to the nest, to invite the reader to experience what it means to be shaped by 2 different worlds.
Congratulations to you all. We are all so proud. We're all so proud. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Welcome. My name is Neely Anderson and I'm a senior. It is my honor today to introduce to you the recipient of the 2019 Harpeth Hall Distinguished Alumna Award. As many of you know, this award is given annually to an alumna who has not only achieved wide recognition for her professional excellence and leadership, but someone who is a trailblazer, who is a moving spirit, who has the vision, skills, and confidence to make things happen. This year's recipient is Margaret Napier Morford, class of 1973. She is indeed a woman that makes things happen. She launched her own corporate consulting firm, HR Edge, in 2002 and works primarily with C-suite executives of Fortune 500 companies to help them develop their management teams and plan strategies for their organization. These are big-time organizations that you would recognize. But just to be sure, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Verizon, Domino's, Nissan, or Comcast. Good. You can put your hands down. Her roster of clients also include Nationwide Insurance, Sara Lee Foods, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Fox Broadcasting, as well as Intercontinental Hotel Group, just to name a few others. She's also worked with the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Treasury Department, and the U.S. Marine Corps. Ms. Morford is a sought-after speaker who has appeared regularly on ABC, NBC, and Fox television affiliates, and who has been featured in Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, and USA Today. She has written 2 best-selling books and credits Harpeth Hall for teaching her how to communicate effectively, especially through writing. As if that's not enough, Ms. Morford devotes a great deal of her time and talent to helping others, especially women, to succeed in business. She's a force in corporate America, a change agent in gender politics, and an absolute delight to be around. Clients who have worked with Ms. Morford consistently refer to her as no-nonsense, hilarious, dynamic, and engaging. I have no doubt that you'll be inspired by Ms. Morford and that you'll be entertained by her as well. Please rise and join me in giving Margaret Napier Morford a warm Harpeth Hall welcome.
Oh, I appreciate it. Please have a seat. That's pretty scary. Ms. Hill, board members, I just can't thank you enough. The words thank you don't express my gratitude for this amazing award. I really, really appreciate it. I'm not sure I'm deserving of it, but it's too late to take it back now. I'm keeping it. Members of the student body, when they told me I had to speak to you today, I asked what they wanted me to speak on, and they said, well, why don't you talk about your career? I can't think of anything that would bore you into a coma faster. Because the way I built my career is in a world that is far different than the world you're going to face. So I thought with the time they are giving me today, I would spend some time teaching you some tools and some leadership lessons that I've learned along the way, sometimes with some pretty disastrous results. So if you can learn from my mistakes, that's a good thing. And give you some tools and some things that you can take and make yourself successful today, tomorrow, and maybe decades in the future. So what I'd like to do is give you eight leadership lessons and tools, and I'm going to give you 8 stories out of my career and upbringing to illustrate those so that we go from theory to real world. Please feel free to just laugh at my career and my life. I'm kind of over that by now. So why don't we start with lesson 1. Now, I can't switch my slides, so the lovely gentleman up there is trying to anticipate what I'm going to say. So this may not come together perfectly. Okay, rule number 1. Will you give me the rest of the slide, please? This is one of my favorite negotiating tools. When I've got to sit down and talk with someone or negotiate something that they don't want to give you, you give them a picture of what it would look like if they gave it to you. Martin Luther King Jr. was probably one of the best at doing that. His famous speech, and I want to be sure I read it correctly because his words are so powerful. He said in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." So to bring us forward as a nation, he began to paint a picture of what it would look like if we did this. So I use this when I negotiate with people, and when I have to negotiate a contract. When you go to speak, a lot of times I wind up with the legal department, and they've got an 18-page contract they want me to sign for one speech. And so when you call the lawyers up, they're all taught, because I used to be a lawyer, they're all taught not to give an inch. So here's how I usually manage that. I'll call up this poor beleaguered lawyer that's got 89 projects on their desk, and I'll say, "This is Margaret Morford, we've got to sign this contract, and I'm ready to sign. I'm ready to sign, the deal is done. I just need these 2 or 3 things changed." And then you can get it off your to-do list. So the picture that gets stuck in their mind is, gosh, if I can just give her this, I can move this off my to-do list. So paint the picture. You need to paint a picture so that people will give you what you want. In one of the companies I was with, because I was the only lawyer, we wanted to buy a design from somebody in New York. And he had this long contract, and we needed a lot of changes. So the head of creative said, "You're a lawyer, see if you can negotiate with this guy. He's impossible to deal with." So I call him up with my Southern accent. You can imagine what I sound like to a guy in New York. And I go, "I've been asked to walk through this contract with you. We need some changes." And there are about 30 changes that we really needed, 15 of which were pretty critical, 5 of which were pretty critical. So I was clear on the ones I needed to walk away with. So as we start, I said, let's start through and talk about areas where we could compromise. He goes, "Okay, fine." And I said, "All right, here, we need this change." And he goes, "Nope, I gotta have that." I said, "Okay, now understand, I started with the stuff I could give away." So I said, "All right, fine. So how about this?" And as I walk through, and he goes, "No, I gotta have that." So as I get to the third one, and he says, "No, I gotta have that," I stopped and I said, "You do understand this is a negotiation, right? So here's what I'm doing. There are 30 things I want to talk to you about. So I've started a tick mark. And on your side of the page, there are 3 tick marks. I've given you everything you've asked for. So when we get done, there should be an even number of tick marks on my side as your side, right? Because that's only fair." Can you see the picture? He goes, "Okay, fine." So the next thing I asked for was something I knew I needed. He goes, "Okay, I'll give you that one. Did you put a tick mark on your side of the ledger?" I did. And as we're working through these 30 points, he would go, "What's the score now?" And by the time we finished, he had 15, I had 15. So give them a picture so that they want to give you what you've asked them for. So the question I want to leave you with under this rule that you should ask yourself in the quiet of your study, as one of my law professors used to say, that means you've got some mental homework. With whom are you negotiating that you need to paint them a picture? That where do you need to change your tactics and give them the picture of what it looks like if they give you what you asked for? All right, DJ, will you give me the next one? This is rule 2, and I call this the tool belt rule. And this came when I was teaching a seminar to some very high-level executives in a very professional firm. So I asked the question, who's been the best boss you've ever had? And so one of the executives raises his hand and he goes, "That would be Leroy." And I said, "Tell me about Leroy." And he goes, "Well, I worked my way through college in construction, and Leroy was my boss. He was my foreman." And he calls me in one day and he goes, "Son, I expect you to make mistakes on this job. I expect you to shoot yourself in the foot, but I don't expect you to reload. That's my rule for failure. When you make a mistake, and you're going to fail. If you're not failing, you're not taking enough risk. But when you fail, you need to, once the dust is settled, go back and look at what happened and ask yourself, what did I learn? Because if you don't post-mortem any mistakes that you make, you're just going to continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. And here's my advice: learn and move on. Do not get stuck in your failures, because one of the keys to really having a successful career in life is to not get stuck. Learn and don't get stuck. And there's one more sentence on the slide, if you'll give that to me. Here's the hint. When you go back and post-mortem that situation, assume nothing changes but your behavior, because it's the only thing you control. And don't say, well, that person was impossible. The guy I'm negotiating with in New York is impossible. You're going to have to deal with impossible people and difficult people. Figure out how to deal with them. Figure out how to get them to give you what you've asked for. So the question to ask yourself, look at your most painful life experience so far, and ask yourself what you could have done differently so that you learn the lessons from those. If you'll give me the next one. This is the Aunt Peg rule. My Aunt Peg is here. Ward Belmont class of 55. Now here, I promised her I wouldn't make her stand up, but I'll make her stay for the reception if you want to meet her. So my Aunt Peg is one of the nicest human beings I know. She never says anything mean about anybody. Now, she's not clueless nice. She understands that there are mean people out there, there are evil people out there. She understands human nature really well, but she just chooses not to dwell in the negative and not to say negative things. So I'm talking to, by the way, my Aunt Peg is 80. I'm talking to my Aunt Peg one day and I go, Aunt Peg, that really pissed me off. And my lovely, non-critical Aunt Peg makes this face. She goes, oh, Margaret, are nice people using that word in polite conversation these days? I felt about this tall. So you have to adjust your message to the audience, because I can guarantee the only thing she heard that I told her was that one word. So adjust your communication to who you're speaking with so they don't shut you down. And I'll tell you a generational one I've noticed that it took me a while to adjust to. In the older generations, or older than you are, thank you, you're welcome. That's how we're taught. Now, your generation says no worries. And the first time somebody no worried me, I went, they just disregarded me, because that's what it feels like to the older generation. Think about who you're talking to. Who are you speaking with that you need to adjust your communication, because your message is more important than how is important, and you've got to deliver it in a way that they hear your message. So ask yourself, what words are you using with various individuals that you need to adjust? I want you to be memorable in a very positive way. So learn the no worries thing. I'll also give you a hint about the older generation. If you learn to do yes ma'am and no sir, the older generation automatically raises your IQ 20 points. It just happens. I was teaching in the Northeast and I had a whole room full of folks and no name tags, which is always hard for me, because if somebody's got a question, I'd rather say, Susie, you had a question, or Joe, you look like you don't agree with that. So because I didn't have them, I fell back on what we're all taught. I go, yes, ma'am, you look like you had a question. Yes, sir, you look like you don't agree with that. So finally, two of my younger, late 20s, leaders that I'm dealing with, one turns to the other and this loud voice says, I'm going to learn that ma'am and sir stuff. It sounds really nice. It does. Use it. It's a great tool. If you'll give me the next one, this is another negotiating rule I want to share with you. To get people on your side, to negotiate what you want. So the toilet in my guest bathroom, my Aunt Peg is cringing now, because she goes, I can't believe she's up there talking about her toilet. Stops working. It's just leaking. So I pull the top off the tank, and that rubber thing has rotted. So clearly I need a new rubber thing, right? So I call the plumber, the plumbing company, and I get this lovely young woman on the phone. And I said, I need, the rubber thing in my toilet has rotted. I need you to send a plumber out to replace the rubber thing and to tell me if I need all new guts in the toilet. I'm up for that if that's what he says I need. She goes, okay, that would be fine. She goes, we have a $65 diagnostic fee and then whatever it costs to fix it. I said, I don't need a diagnosis. No, I know what's wrong with it. The rubber thing is rotted. She goes, nevertheless, it's a $65 diagnostic fee, and then whatever it costs to repair it. I go, I did not go to plumbing school. I'll own up to that. But really, even I know what's wrong with it. And so she goes, nevertheless. So here's the tool. So I said, well, I've just told you what's wrong with my toilet, and you've just told me it's going to cost me $65 for somebody to look in the tank and in 20 seconds tell me what's wrong with it. Can you understand why I'm struggling with that? Now don't say, can you understand how I feel? Because there are a lot of people that will go, I don't understand how she feels, but I can understand her struggle. So I said, so can you understand why I'm struggling with this? And here's the key, shut up. Shut up, don't say anything. This is the only person who can solve my problem, so I'm just going to let her sit there and solve my problem for me. So there's about 5 to 7 seconds of dead air on the phone, and she goes, Miss Morford, what if I gave you a $65 new customer discount? Would that work for you? I said, that would work quite well for me. She goes, now I want to be clear. They're still going to charge you the $65 diagnostic fee, but it's going to be a wash. Are you okay with that? I said, I'm very good with that. Now, here's the key. Can you understand why I'm struggling with that? Use those words because people will come over to your side. So, who have you not been able to get on your side? Think about a relationship that you've got where you might be able to use that tool and it would get you off of ground zero and actually get you what you want. JD, will you give me the next one? Rule 5. Humor can change the behavior of others better than a lecture. It keeps people on your side when you deliver when you deliver a lesson and it makes both of you laugh. Humor is great for that. Oftentimes, when I had a regular job before I had my own company, as my husband calls it, a real job, oftentimes I'd be the only woman in senior management. And his big joke was, is it you and 5 guys or you and 6 guys in senior management? And over time, the good news is they would forget that I wasn't a guy. And occasionally, things would get a little off track. And instead of getting offended, I would go, gentlemen, some decorum here. And they would all laugh. We'd go back, and they didn't hate me when we were done. Now, here's where humor saved my career. I am early on, just out of college, and I've made a big mistake. I mean, it's big. It's big. I'm going to have to go tell the CEO what I've done. And everybody is scared of the CEO. He was a yeller and a screamer. I mean, he was scared. When he would scream at people, you could hear that all the way through the building. So I've got to go tell him I've made this mistake, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind he's going to fire me. I've never been fired in my whole life. This is shameful. Now, I line all of this up to tell you this. I will do anything to save my job. I don't want to get fired. And here's what I know about him. He has an innate sense of fairness, and he's got a good sense of humor. So I think if I can make him laugh, I might actually survive this incident in my career. This mistake is so bad, it took me 2 days to work up the courage to go talk to him. And in those 2 days, I would say to my very supportive coworkers, I would tell them what I'd done, and they would look at me and go, oh, Margaret. They offered no hope whatsoever for whether I was going to survive this or not. As a matter of fact, they started a pool for how long I was going to stay employed, and you could buy chances by the hour. So finally, I work up my nerve. I've got to go tell him, knock on his door, come in. He's working on something. And I said, if you've got a moment, there's something I need to talk to you about. And so he says, yeah, I just need 2 minutes to finish this up. Let me finish this up and I'll be right with you. Have a seat. So I sit down in the chair in front of his desk. He finishes up what he's doing. And when he looks up, this is all he can see. I am scrunched down in his chair in front of his desk, and all he can see is the part in my hair. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm ready. He goes, what? I said, I'm ready. He goes, what are you talking about? Only that's the cleaned up version of what he asked me. I said, I'm ready. Everybody tells me that when they come and tell you they've made a mistake, you always shoot the messenger, so I'm ready. And I haven't moved. He's still talking to the top of my head. He goes, they do they? Oh, yes, sir. What they describe happens to people is very scary. And I said, as a matter of fact, there's a pool going out there for how long I'm going to stay employed once I tell you this. You can buy chances by the hour. I think you can still get in on the pool. I haven't moved. And he goes, so you've made a mistake. Oh, yes, sir, it's a really big one. And he says, well, sit up and tell me about it. So I sit up to tell him about this big mistake I made. And I finish up, and he is trying so hard not to live up to this piece of feedback. I can see the vein pulsing in his head. It's the scariest thing ever. And at this point, my inner sensor isn't working at all. You just say whatever goes through your head. He goes, is that it? I go, isn't that enough? He goes, well, get out there and get it fixed. And I realize, oh my gosh, I'm still employed. So I get out of that chair so fast so he can't change his mind. And as I'm running for the door, he stops me as I get to the door. He goes, and go tell everybody I didn't shoot the messenger. And because I'm so rattled at that point, I say, yes, sir, I'll tell them. I don't know that they'll believe it, but I'll tell them. Sense of humor saved my job. Okay, now, if you read my bio at all, you know that I used to practice law. I'm a recovering attorney now. But that never leaves you. So rule 5 was sense of humor will work better than a lecture. Rule 6, the exact opposite. I'm sorry, I confused you. Humor isn't always appropriate and depends upon the type of individual, group, or situation with which you're dealing. This is the Elvis rule. So my husband and I decide to go to Memphis to see, you'd be very proud, all my teachers at Harpeth Hall would be very proud, to see the treasures of the Romanovs. It's there, it's a visiting exhibit. So we're gonna go do this wonderful thing. But we have an extra day there. So he says, what would you like to do? And I said, we should go to Graceland. And he goes, are you serious? And I go, oh yeah, we should. So here's what happens. How many of you have been to Graceland? Okay, and you know how the Welcome Center where you buy your tickets and shell out your money is across an 8-lane highway. So you get your tickets, they assign you to a little group of 25, they load you in a van, they take you across the street and you tour through the house. If you haven't been to Graceland, I really recommend it. It is really an amazing, horrific decoration thing that everybody should experience once. Now here's what you gotta know about Graceland. So the house is here on the hill. Next to it is the pool, and then next to the pool is Elvis's grave, and Elvis's mama's grave, and Colonel Parker's grave. There are about 8 graves there. And behind that, there are like 6 panels of stained glass windows, and then hanging over these 8 graves is this huge 15-foot concrete angel. You wind up at the graves towards the end of the tour, So we're getting to the end of the tour. We wind up with our tour group out at the graves that are right next to the pool. And everybody starts sobbing. And there are flowers from all over the world. You can read the cards. Everybody's sobbing at the grave of the king, except my husband and myself. He happens to be standing over my shoulder, and I turn to him and I go, I don't know about you, but these graves would cast a pall over any pool party I wanted to give. And we start doing that. And then we can't get control of ourselves. So everybody's crying, and the 2 of us are standing at Elvis's grave laughing like crazy people. Until the guide for our group comes over and tells us we need to remove ourselves back to the bus. We got sent away in disgrace to sit in the bus until. So they all get on the bus. We were wise enough to sit in the very back, and they're all giving us the stink eye because we have not been sufficiently respectful. So I get home and I go to tell my mother this story. My mother, the matriarch. Now she's passed on, Ward Belmont class of 52. She's passed on, but she's the original Steel Magnolia. So I tell her the story, she doesn't laugh once. She goes, do not ever tell that story again. I do not want people to know that I raised a child that is so ill-mannered she got thrown out of a tacky place like Graceland. Don't tell that story. So, questions you should ask yourself: is your sense of humor appropriate? Who in your life do you tease a lot? Are you sure it's funny to them? Just because they laugh doesn't mean they find it funny. And then ask yourself, who do you joke about behind their backs? That's when sense of humor is not appropriate, and you need to understand that. I will caution you, particularly, don't just think about it as things you say. Think about what your social media says about you. What are you saying about people on social media? Is it really as funny as you think it is? Or is it cruel and unkind? Next one, Rule 7. This I learned from my 10-year-old niece. Whenever she wants something from me, she goes, "Oh, Aunt Margaret, if you could do that for me, you would be my new very best friend." Gets what she wants for her every single time. Here's what I discovered. It works on every adult out there, and it doesn't have to be your niece. I have said to a hotel that was absolutely full and there was not a room to be had, I have stood there and said, I could use just a small travel miracle here. If you could work this out for me, you could be my new very best friend. And they all start laughing, and then they all get on their computer. I actually stayed in the presidential suite for 3 days in the Wichita, Kansas Hyatt, because that was the only room that was available, and of course they would give it to me because they're my new very best friend. Here's the other one I use a lot. If there's one person, you know, when they go, well, I can't do that for you, probably the only person that can do that for you is Joe Smith. Can you connect me to Joe? And so when Joe answers the phone, I'll go, is this the great and powerful Joe Smith? And they'll always go, yes. Well, I understand you're the only one that can do this for me. And I just need a small miracle here. 90% of the time they'll work it out for me because they know the system better than I do. You cannot appreciate people enough. You cannot. Most people are starving for appreciation, but it has to be look somebody square in the eye and tell them specifically what you appreciate about them. Don't just say, I appreciate you. Tell them what you appreciate about them. I had an employee who was fairly quiet, and I went in their office one day and I said, I just want to tell you, I don't know what I'd do without you. You are the rock. You are absolutely the rock. They ran through the entire building telling everybody, you know what, my boss thinks I'm the rock. I am the rock. That's all they would talk about. And so they came dragging in about 3 months later, and they were sick, really sick. And I said, you shouldn't have come in. Oh, I had to come in. What would you do if the rock didn't come in? Appreciation's never wasted. Last but not least, avoid letting people's expectations change your behavior to something that doesn't work for you or achieve a correct result. The question I get asked a lot is, why did you give up practicing law? I said, well, I was a good attorney. I'm a great consultant. And I love consulting because you're building up people. I always found myself hoping that my clients would never need me again because that meant they were in trouble. And sort of the watershed moment for me was when I said to a senior partner, and I'm just a green associate, I've been practicing about 5 years at this point, I said, this is the third one of these I've handled for our client. If we went in and did some education with their managers and supervisors, this would quit happening. He goes, don't do that. We need the billable hours. I go, this is not who I am. So I went back to the business world that I'd been in, which was a great place for me to work, and I love what I do. I love what I do every day. I get to make people better. It's my sweet spot. You have to find your own sweet spot, but don't let other people's expectations. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, so you wasted 8 years of your life. 3 years in law school and 5 years practicing. And I go, no, actually, I use the stuff I learn every single day, negotiating contracts and things like that. No, it wasn't wasted. It just wasn't for me. So I'm going to encourage you to find your sweet spot. Now, I want to close with this and share this with you. When I got the call to say that I had won this award, I had two emotions. One, I was incredibly humbled, and two, I was stunned. Absolutely stunned, mostly stunned, because there's nothing in my Harpeth Hall years that would have indicated that I'd be standing on this stage 40 years later and accepting this award. I was not a standout. I wasn't Lady of the Hall. By the way, the Lady of the Hall for my year is sitting down there. I wasn't a National Merit Scholar. I certainly didn't win the awards that you just saw up here on the stage. I wasn't even George or Martha Washington. There was nothing standout about me. I was just studying really hard trying to graduate. I was studying pretty hard trying not to graduate. And I share this with you because I want to encourage you. All of you could be standing here in several years being a distinguished alumni. You all have the ability to do that, or you wouldn't be sitting in this audience. But what I'll tell you is it all depends on you. You have to decide what you want to do with your life. And my years of experience have taught me that to be successful in your career and to be successful in your life, you just have to do three things. How hard are you willing to work? How do you handle your successes, but more important, your failures? And how much are you willing to give to others? The formula is pretty simple, but doing it is not easy. So I'm going to challenge you here today. Find your sweet spot. Ask yourself those three questions, because I would love to see each and every one of you standing on this stage at some point in your career. Thank you so much for having me today and for listening to me. I wish you the greatest future of all. Thanks. I don't know how long our time was, but I need to.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I mean, I wish I had, you're going to send those to us so I didn't have to take notes during your.
I will be happy.
Okay, great, great.
You'd even want them.
Great. No, don't go down yet. I just want to give you this little gift. Thank you so much. Girls, I don't think we have time for questions now, but if you have a free period and you'd like to come down and ask some questions, you may. Margaret, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to our guests for being here. And we'll be at the reception afterwards. Thank you. Charlotte.